Hello everyone, welcome to the Boring History channel. Make sure you're subscribed so our daily history reaches you without missing a single story. Tonight we're stepping into a world where a hole in your skull could be considered medicine. Rotten ingredients were trusted cures, and whispers, blood, and strange rituals were often the only hope of survival. These unbelievable treatments once saved lives or ended them. So get comfortable, relax, and let history slowly unfold. And before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the stories I share here. Long before hospitals, pharmacies, or even the idea that invisible germs could cause disease, people had to rely on whatever knowledge, beliefs, traditions, and desperate experiments they possessed to survive illness. If you woke up with a fever 5,000 years ago, there was no doctor waiting in a clean clinic with antibiotics or an MRI machine. Instead, your family, village healer, priest, or local wise woman would decide what they believed had gone wrong inside your body. Sometimes they guessed surprisingly well. Other times their treatments were so strange that they seem almost unbelievable today. Across the ancient world, illness was rarely viewed as something purely physical. Many cultures believed sickness was caused by angry gods, evil spirits, curses from enemies, or even the jealousy of ancestors. Healing, therefore, meant not only treating the body, but also convincing supernatural forces to leave the patient alone. This produced some of the most unusual medical practices in human history, where prayer, ritual, herbs, animals, and bizarre objects all became part of the cure. One of the oldest known medical procedures was trepanation, a practice in which people drilled, scraped, or cut holes into a living person's skull. Archaeologists have discovered thousands of ancient skulls from Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas showing perfectly round openings that healed during the person's lifetime, proving many patients actually survived. To modern eyes, it appears horrifying, but ancient healers believed opening the skull allowed evil spirits causing headaches, seizures, mental illness, or strange behavior to escape. Others may have used it to relieve pressure after severe head injuries. Without anesthesia, antiseptics, or modern surgical tools, the operation depended on remarkable patience and incredible tolerance for pain. Yet surprisingly, evidence suggests many individuals recovered well enough for the bone to begin healing, making trepanation one of humanity's oldest surviving surgical techniques. In ancient Egypt, medicine blended practical observation with powerful magic. Egyptian healers possessed surprisingly advanced knowledge of broken bones, wounds, and anatomy, thanks to centuries of embalming the dead. Yet magical spells remained just as important as herbal remedies. Medical papyri contain instructions that mixed ingredients like honey, onions, figs, milk, crocodile fat, animal organs, and minerals into pastes applied directly to the body. Honey actually helped prevent infection because of its natural antibacterial properties, although the Egyptians could not have understood why. Other treatments were far stranger. A patient suffering from eye disease might receive powdered minerals mixed with animal liver. Toothaches could be treated with dead mice ground into a paste and placed against aching gums. Some illnesses required wearing magical amulets while priests recited protective prayers, designed to frighten away invisible demons responsible for disease. The people of Mesopotamia believed illness often reflected divine punishment. If someone suddenly became sick, priests attempted to identify which god had been offended. Clay tablets describe elaborate rituals involving sacrifices, symbolic figurines, prayers, and incantations. Sometimes healers transferred illness into small clay statues or animals before destroying or releasing them, hoping the disease would leave with its new host. Alongside these rituals, practical healers prescribed plants, oils, beer mixtures, and poultices that occasionally contained ingredients with genuine medicinal effects. Religion and medicine existed together rather than separately, making recovery as much a spiritual journey as a physical one. Ancient Greek medicine introduced one of history's most influential medical theories, the belief that health depended on balancing four bodily humours: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. According to physicians, disease occurred when these fluids fell out of balance. Almost every treatment attempted to restore harmony by removing or adjusting one humour. Patients were encouraged to eat special diets, exercise differently, bathe, vomit, sweat excessively, or undergo bloodletting. While the humour theory remained incorrect, it dominated medicine for nearly 2,000 years and shaped countless treatments across Europe and the Middle East. Physicians carefully examined urine colour, pulse, sleep habits, and even personality traits before deciding which humour needed correction. Bloodletting became one of history's most enduring medical practices. Doctors believed removing blood could cure fevers, headaches, infections, pneumonia, high blood pressure, and almost every imaginable illness. Using knives, sharp instruments, or specially bred leeches, they drained varying amounts of blood from patients. In some cases, people became weaker simply because too much blood had been removed. Yet because some illnesses naturally improved over time, bloodletting earned a reputation for success and survived well into the 19th century. Leeches themselves remain surprisingly useful today in certain modern reconstructive surgeries because they improve blood circulation, although their ancient purpose was based on entirely different reasoning. Ancient Romans inherited much of Greek medicine but added their own unusual remedies. Pliny the Elder documented hundreds of treatments involving animals and household ingredients. Baldness might be treated using burnt hedgehog ashes. Epilepsy could supposedly improve by drinking the blood of fallen gladiators, a practice based on the belief that courage and strength could transfer from one person to another. Snake fat, owl eggs, goat dung, wolf liver, and countless other ingredients appeared in Roman remedies. Wealthy citizens could afford famous physicians, while ordinary people often relied on traveling healers selling miracle cures in busy marketplaces. Throughout many cultures, strange smells played an important role in healing. Before germ theory, foul odors were often blamed for causing disease. People believed poisonous air, called miasma, spread sickness through unpleasant smells. During epidemics, they burned herbs, incense, wood, sulfur, or fragrant flowers to purify the surrounding air. Physicians carried scented sponges near their noses while visiting patients. Some wore necklaces filled with aromatic plants believed to block disease from entering the body through breathing. Although pleasant smells could not stop infections, some herbs accidentally repelled insects that carried diseases, providing limited benefits without anyone understanding the real reason. Urine served as both a diagnostic tool and a medicine in surprising parts of history. Physicians carefully inspected its color, smell, taste, and clarity to determine what illness someone might have. Even more surprisingly, urine itself became an ingredient in treatments. In some traditions, it was applied to wounds, consumed for certain ailments, or used to wash infected areas. Fresh urine contains ammonia, producing compounds, and was believed to possess cleansing powers. While modern medicine strongly rejects most of these practices, they remained common for centuries because people observed occasional recoveries and credited the treatment, rather than the body's natural healing ability. Animal parts appeared constantly in ancient medicine. Bear grease treated aching joints. Snake skins protected against poisoning. Ground antlers supposedly strengthened weak bones. Owl feathers frightened away nightmares, causing illness. Dried bats, powdered shells, crushed insects, and fish organs entered countless recipes. Every creature seemed to possess hidden healing powers waiting to be transferred into humans. The rarer the animal, the more valuable its supposed medicinal properties became. Wealthy patients sometimes paid enormous sums for exotic ingredients imported across continents, simply because unusual substances inspired confidence. Magic words carried equal importance. Many healers believed spoken language itself possessed physical power. Patients repeated sacred phrases, wore written charms around their necks, or slept with inscribed tablets beneath their pillows. Certain illnesses required chanting specific words several times while facing a particular direction or during a certain phase of the moon. Mistakes in pronunciation supposedly weakened the cure. Across generations, these rituals became deeply embedded within local traditions, providing comfort even when they offered no measurable medical benefit. Some treatments intentionally frightened patients. Loud noises, sudden surprises, or symbolic rituals attempted to shock illness out of the body. Drums echoed through villages, while healers danced around the sick. Masks representing spirits surrounded patients during ceremonies. In some cultures, entire communities gathered to sing, clap, and perform rituals believed to chase disease away. Although ineffective against infections, these communal events strengthened social bonds and reassured frightened families that everything possible was being done. Sweating occupied an important place in ancient healing. People believed excessive sweating expelled harmful substances responsible for sickness. Patients sat beside roaring fires wrapped in heavy blankets or entered primitive steam rooms built from heated stones. Herbal vapors filled enclosed spaces while patients perspired heavily. Similar traditions appeared independently across many civilizations, from Native American sweat lodges to Roman bathhouses. While sweating itself rarely cured disease, warm steam sometimes eased congestion and muscle pain, giving patients temporary relief. Fasting also became a universal remedy. Imagine developing a terrible toothache in a world where dentists did not exist. Tooth pain was among the most feared forms of suffering, because once decay reached the inner nerves, the pain could become unbearable. Ancient people invented astonishing explanations for why teeth hurt. One of the most widespread beliefs was the existence of the toothworm. Across Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, many believed tiny worms lived inside teeth and chewed through them, creating pain. This idea survived for thousands of years because cavities often contained dark holes that resembled tunnels. Healers attempted to smoke the imaginary worms out by placing burning herbs beneath the patient's mouth while they inhaled the fumes. Others poured heated oils or herbal mixtures directly into cavities, believing the worms would either die or crawl away. Some even recited special charms that supposedly ordered the worms to leave. In reality, bacteria were silently destroying the teeth. But without microscopes, the worm explanation seemed perfectly reasonable. Burns presented another terrifying challenge. If someone fell into a fire or spilled boiling water over themselves, every family had its own trusted remedy. Animal fats were spread across damaged skin. Honey, milk, crushed herbs, clay, mud, egg whites, or even fermented drinks were applied directly onto burns. Some of these remedies accidentally protected wounds from infection, while others trapped bacteria beneath thick layers of grease. Ancient healers judged success simply by whether the patient survived. If someone recovered after receiving a particular treatment, the remedy became part of local tradition and was passed to future generations without question. Sleep itself was considered medicine, long before scientists understood the importance of rest. Many cultures believed prolonged sleep allowed the body to heal itself. Sick people were encouraged to remain in quiet, dark rooms for days while relatives minimized noise. Temples dedicated to healing gods often welcomed the sick, who slept inside sacred buildings hoping divine dreams would reveal the cure. Priests interpreted these dreams and prescribed treatments based on the visions patients reported upon waking. Whether through reduced stress or simple rest, some individuals naturally improved, reinforcing belief in dream healing. Ancient childbirth was another moment when medicine and superstition blended together. Pregnancy was incredibly dangerous, and many women never survived labor. Midwives relied on practical experience gathered over decades, but they also surrounded births with magical rituals. Protective amulets hung around the mother's neck. Special knots were untied throughout the house because people believed loosening knots helped open the birth canal. Certain doors remained open during labor to symbolize an easy passage for the baby. Sacred songs echoed through homes while herbs filled the air. If complications occurred, desperate families often combined every known remedy at once, praying that at least one would succeed. Mental illness was perhaps the least understood of all conditions. Depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, epilepsy, or dementia were rarely recognized as medical disorders. Instead, unusual behavior was frequently blamed on possession by spirits, witchcraft, curses, or divine punishment. Treatments reflected these beliefs. Some patients underwent loud exorcisms involving chanting, smoke, bells, and religious rituals. Others were isolated from society or forced to wear protective charms. In some communities, healers attempted to negotiate with the spirit causing illness rather than attacking it directly. While frightening by modern standards, many families genuinely believed they were helping loved ones trapped by supernatural forces. The moon also influenced medicine in surprising ways. Numerous civilizations believed the phases of the moon affected health. Certain surgeries were avoided during particular lunar phases. Bloodletting occurred only when the moon reached specific positions. Herbal medicines were gathered at night because healers believed moonlight strengthened their healing power. Farmers already noticed the moon influenced tides and certain natural cycles, so extending that influence to human health seemed logical. Even today, traces of these ancient beliefs survive in folklore around the world. Snakes occupied a fascinating role in healing traditions. Their ability to shed skin symbolized renewal and rebirth. Snake venom, skin, fat, and even powdered bones appeared in ancient remedies, despite the obvious dangers. Ironically, modern medicine now uses carefully studied snake venom components to develop life, saving medications for blood pressure and other conditions. Ancient healers lacked scientific understanding, yet they intuitively associated powerful animals with powerful healing abilities. Many illnesses were treated through balance rather than direct attack. In traditional systems across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, health depended on maintaining harmony within the body. Foods were labeled as hot or cold, regardless of actual temperature. A fever considered excessively hot might be treated with cooling fruits, water, or herbs. Someone believed to suffer from excessive coldness received warming spices, soups, or heated stones. Although the scientific explanations differed from reality, encouraging hydration, nutritious food, and warmth sometimes genuinely helped recovering patients. Children received especially unusual treatments because they were considered particularly vulnerable to evil spirits. Babies often wore necklaces made from animal teeth, shells, carved stones, or small metal objects intended to protect them from disease. Mothers painted symbols above cribs or tied coloured threads around tiny wrists. If an infant cried continuously, some believed invisible spirits were attempting to steal the child's soul. Entire ceremonies involving singing, dancing, incense, and protective prayers surrounded newborns during their first weeks of life. Poisoning terrified ancient societies because there was rarely any reliable antidote. Wealthy rulers feared assassination so much that they hired food tasters before every meal. When poisoning was suspected, healers induced vomiting using herbs or unpleasant mixtures. Charcoal from burned wood sometimes entered these remedies, unknowingly providing a substance that modern medicine still uses in emergency poison treatment. However, many other supposed antidotes included crushed gemstones, precious metals, or mythical ingredients that offered no protection whatsoever. Animal bites created another medical mystery. Before vaccines or antibiotics, even a small bite from a dog or wild animal could become fatal through infection or rabies. Ancient remedies ranged from practical wound washing to bizarre rituals involving the offending animal itself. Some cultures believed placing hair from the biting dog onto the wound would encourage healing, an idea that eventually inspired the expression, hair of the dog. Others burned the animal's bones into powder and sprinkled them over injuries, believing the creature's power could reverse the damage it caused. Music served as medicine in many civilizations. Physicians observed that calm melodies soothed frightened patients, while energetic rhythms encouraged movement during recovery. Flutes, drums, harps, and chanting accompanied healing ceremonies across continents. Although music could not eliminate infections, it reduced anxiety, distracted patients from pain, and strengthened emotional resilience. Modern hospitals still use music therapy in certain settings, showing that one ancient idea retained genuine value despite thousands of years of medical progress. Water occupied a sacred place in healing traditions. Mineral springs became famous because people claimed miraculous recoveries after bathing or drinking from them. Entire towns grew around natural springs, believed to cure blindness, paralysis, stomach illness, or skin diseases. While many claims were exaggerated, mineral-rich water sometimes improved certain skin conditions or encouraged hydration, leading visitors to believe supernatural powers were responsible. One of the most expensive medical ingredients in history was powdered mummy. During the Middle Ages and Renaissance, many Europeans believed ground Egyptian mummies possessed remarkable healing powers. Pharmacies actually sold powdered human remains imported from ancient tombs. Patients swallowed these powders hoping to cure headaches, internal bleeding, epilepsy, or general weakness. The belief became so widespread that demand eventually exceeded supply, leading to counterfeit mummies being manufactured solely for the medical trade. It remains one of history's strangest examples of medicine driven by reputation rather than evidence. Perfumes also entered the medical world. Physicians carried fragrant flowers, spices, or scented cloth because they believed pleasant aromas blocked disease. Wealthy households burned cinnamon, cloves, frankincense, and myrrh throughout their homes whenever illness appeared. Expensive perfumes became more than luxury items. They functioned as invisible shields against sickness in the minds of those who wore them. While ineffective against viruses or bacteria, aromatic smoke occasionally discouraged insects that spread certain diseases, producing accidental benefits. As knowledge slowly accumulated through observation, travel, and written records, some healers began questioning traditional beliefs. They noticed clean wounds healed better than dirty ones. Fresh air often improved recovery compared to crowded rooms. Certain herbs repeatedly relieved pain, while others consistently failed. Bit by bit, medicine evolved from magical tradition towards systematic observation. In many ancient villages, the kitchen was the closest thing people had to a pharmacy. Almost every shelf, basket, or storage jar contained something believed to fight disease. Garlic was eaten to ward off infections and evil spirits alike. Onions were hung inside homes because people believed they absorbed sickness from the air. Vinegar cleaned wounds, preserved food, and was mixed into countless remedies. Cabbage leaves were wrapped around swollen joints, while crushed herbs became thick pastes spread across bruises and cuts. Every household guarded its own collection of recipes, often passed from grandparents to grandchildren. These remedies became family treasures, and questioning them was almost unthinkable because they represented generations of survival. Seasonal illnesses created their own traditions. When winter brought coughing and fever, entire communities prepared warming broths filled with herbs and spices. During hot summers, cooling drinks made from fruits, flowers, or fermented grains were believed to restore balance inside the body. People noticed diseases often appeared during certain seasons, but had no understanding of viruses or bacteria. Instead, they blamed changing winds, angry spirits awakened by weather, or invisible poisons released by nature. Villagers carefully watched the sky, believing unusual clouds, eclipses, or comets could predict outbreaks of disease before the first patient even became sick. Ancient travelers carried portable medicine kits that would seem unusual today. Leather pouches contained dried herbs, animal bones, tiny jars of oils, powders made from minerals, and protective charms. A merchant crossing a desert or mountain range could not expect to find a healer nearby, so these collections served as emergency medical supplies. Some travelers also carried lucky stones believed to protect against snake bites, fever, or exhaustion. Even experienced soldiers marching across vast empires depended as much on these traditional remedies as on their weapons. The smell of illness deeply frightened ancient people. They noticed that severe disease often produced unpleasant odors, especially from infected wounds or decomposing bodies. Without understanding bacteria, they concluded that the smell itself caused sickness. This belief encouraged some truly unusual practices. People stuffed flowers into their noses while caring for sick relatives. Wealthy citizens carried fragrant apples filled with cloves or herbs wherever they walked. During epidemics, entire streets filled with the smoke of burning wood, incense, and aromatic plants in the hope that clean-smelling air would chase disease away. While the reasoning was incorrect, burning certain herbs sometimes reduced insects or improved sanitation in crowded areas. Hair and nails were also connected to health in fascinating ways. Some cultures believed cutting hair during illness weakened a person's life force, while others insisted shaving the head removed disease from the body. Fingernail clippings were carefully buried or burned because people feared enemies could use them to cast harmful spells. If a healer requested a lock of hair, it was often used in rituals intended to transfer illness away from the patient. Physical pieces of the body were thought to remain spiritually connected to the individual long after they had been removed. Even shadows sometimes became part of medicine. In certain traditions, a person's shadow represented their life energy. If someone appeared weak or chronically ill, people believed an evil force had damaged their shadow rather than their physical body. Healers performed ceremonies at sunrise or sunset, when shadows stretched across the ground, attempting to restore the missing strength through symbolic gestures. Although impossible to measure scientifically, these rituals often brought emotional reassurance to frightened families. Ancient physicians also paid close attention to dreams involving animals. A patient dreaming of snakes might receive one treatment, while dreams of birds or wolves suggested completely different illnesses. Dreams were considered messages sent by gods or ancestors, offering clues hidden from ordinary sight. Patients described every detail upon waking, and experienced healers interpreted these stories with remarkable seriousness. A successful interpretation enhanced the healer's reputation, while failures were often blamed on spirits deliberately confusing the patient. Many remedies relied on the principle that like cures like. If a disease caused yellow skin, yellow plants became the preferred treatment. If a patient coughed blood, Red-colored herbs or berries might be prescribed because they resembled blood itself. Walnuts were believed to strengthen the brain because their shape resembled the human brain. Kidney beans supposedly benefited the kidneys, while lung-shaped plants treated breathing problems. This idea became known much later as the doctrine of signatures and influenced herbal medicine for centuries. Despite lacking scientific evidence, pain relief remained one of medicine's greatest challenges. Ancient surgeons performed amputations, removed arrows, stitched wounds, and even operated on skulls without modern anesthetics. Alcohol became the most common painkiller available, often consumed in enormous quantities before surgery. Strong herbal mixtures containing poppy, mandrake, henbane, or cannabis were sometimes used to dull consciousness, though determining a safe dose was almost impossible. Too little left patients screaming in agony. Too much could stop breathing altogether. Every operation balanced between unbearable pain and deadly overdose. People also believed laughter possessed healing powers. Storytellers, musicians, and performers occasionally visited the sick, particularly wealthy patients, to improve their mood. Families surrounded recovering relatives with songs, jokes, and celebrations whenever possible. Although they could not explain why happiness seemed beneficial, modern science recognizes that positive emotional states can influence stress hormones and overall well-being. Once again, ancient observations occasionally reached useful conclusions, despite incorrect explanations. In isolated mountain villages, caves often became natural hospitals. Their cool temperatures helped preserve food, store medicinal plants, and shelter patients from harsh weather. Certain caves containing mineral, rich water, or unusual rock formations earned reputations as sacred healing places. Pilgrims traveled long distances simply to spend one night inside these caves, convinced that sleeping there allowed the earth itself to draw sickness out of the body. Some caves remained famous healing destinations for hundreds of years. One particularly unusual belief involved transferring illness into objects. Instead of trying to destroy disease directly, healers symbolically moved it elsewhere. A sick person might touch a tree while reciting special words, leaving the illness trapped inside the bark. Others placed bread beneath their pillow overnight before feeding it to animals, believing the disease left with the food. Small dolls representing the patient were buried, burned, or thrown into rivers to carry sickness away forever. These rituals reflected humanity's deep desire to give invisible diseases a visible form that could be physically removed. Old age brought its own collection of remedies. Since wrinkles, weak joints, and fading eyesight were viewed as natural but unfortunate parts of life, people searched endlessly for ways to restore. Youth, exotic animal organs, rare herbs, precious metals, and expensive wines were promoted as miraculous, rejuvenating medicines. Kings and emperors spent fortunes chasing eternal youth. Some drank mixtures containing gold because they believed the precious metal transferred its strength into the body. Others consumed dangerous substances like mercury, mistakenly believing they slowed aging. Ironically, these supposed anti-aging treatments often shortened lives instead. Perhaps the greatest medicine of all before hospitals was community itself. When someone became seriously ill, neighbors frequently brought food, gathered firewood, watched children, cleaned homes, and remained beside the patient for days. Survival often depended less on medicine than on whether enough healthy people were available to provide care. Even ineffective treatments gained value because they gave families something meaningful to do during frightening moments. Preparing herbal teas, changing bandages, singing prayers, or sitting beside the sick throughout the night reminded patients they were not facing illness alone. As centuries passed, merchants carried medical ideas across continents. Travelers returning from distant lands introduced unfamiliar plants, spices, and healing techniques. A remedy invented in India might eventually reach Persia, then the Middle East, and finally Europe through generations of trade. Chinese herbal knowledge, Egyptian surgery, Greek medical theory, Roman organization, and Arabic scholarship gradually mixed together, creating increasingly sophisticated systems of healing. Every civilization borrowed useful ideas from others, while adding its own traditions to the growing collection of medical knowledge. The arrival of hospitals did not instantly erase these ancient beliefs. For hundreds of years, professional physicians and traditional healers existed side by side. Patients often visited both, hoping that if one treatment failed, another might succeed. A person could receive herbal medicine in the morning, attend a religious healing ceremony in the afternoon, and undergo bloodletting the following day. Medicine remained a mixture of science, experience, faith, and folklore, until discoveries about anatomy, microorganisms, vaccination, and sanitation slowly transformed healthcare forever. One of the strangest beliefs shared by many ancient cultures was that diseases could physically travel from one person to another through symbolic transfer, rather than invisible microbes. To make this happen, healers sometimes placed an egg against the patient's body, believing it absorbed the sickness. The egg was then buried, thrown into a river, or smashed far away from the village, so the illness could never return. Similar rituals involved bread, stones, dolls, or pieces of cloth. Once these objects had collected the disease, nobody dared touch them again. While these ceremonies had no medical effect, they often gave patients hope that the illness had finally left their bodies. Astrology also played an enormous role in healthcare. Before treating a patient, some physicians consulted the stars instead of immediately examining the body. They believed every organ corresponded to a zodiac sign, and that the positions of planets determined whether a treatment would succeed or fail. Bloodletting performed under the wrong constellation was thought to be dangerous, while surgeries were postponed until the heavens appeared favorable. Wealthy rulers even hired court astrologers whose primary responsibility was choosing the safest dates for medical procedures. A successful recovery strengthened belief in astrology, while unsuccessful treatments were blamed on misread stars rather than flawed medicine. Many ancient healers believed the human body constantly interacted with nature in mysterious ways. If someone became ill after walking through a forest, the trees themselves might be suspected. Rivers could carry healing spirits or harmful ones depending on local traditions. Mountains were believed to possess powerful energies capable of restoring health. Certain rocks became sacred simply because people claimed miraculous recoveries after touching them. Entire pilgrimages developed around these natural landmarks, attracting thousands of hopeful visitors every year. Colorful birds often appeared in healing ceremonies because their ability to fly symbolized freedom from suffering. Feathers decorated healing staffs, ceremonial clothing, and protective charms. Some cultures released birds into the sky during recovery rituals, believing the animals carried disease away as they disappeared into the distance. Others interpreted the direction of a bird's flight as a prediction of whether the patient would survive. These ceremonies combined medicine, religion, and symbolism into a single event that comforted families during uncertain times. Ancient fishermen had their own medical traditions based on the sea. Fish oils were rubbed onto aching joints and dry skin long before scientists identified beneficial fatty acids. Seaweed wrapped around wounds or swollen limbs because people believed the ocean possessed cleansing powers. Shells were ground into powders rich in calcium without anyone understanding their chemical composition. Salt water washed cuts despite causing painful stinging because generations had noticed that wounds cleaned with seawater sometimes healed better than those left untreated. Eyes were surrounded by especially unusual beliefs because blindness seemed mysterious and terrifying. Some healers believed staring directly at certain gemstones improved vision. Others recommended looking toward the rising sun each morning for a few moments, despite the obvious danger. Eye infections received treatments involving milk, honey, herbs, animal bile, or powdered minerals. A few remedies, particularly those using clean honey, occasionally reduced bacterial growth, while others caused further irritation. Since eyesight often changed gradually, almost any treatment could appear successful if patients naturally experienced temporary improvement. Hiccups, sneezing, and yawning also attracted strange explanations. A sudden sneeze might mean an evil spirit had briefly entered or left the body. Hiccups could indicate someone was secretly thinking about you, or that trapped air carried disease. Yawning was sometimes considered dangerous because it supposedly allowed harmful spirits to enter through the open mouth. Parents encouraged children to cover their mouths not only out of politeness, but also to protect their souls from invisible threats. Long before germ theory encouraged covering coughs and sneezes, people had entirely different reasons for similar habits. Fingertips themselves became diagnostic tools. Experienced healers carefully touched swollen joints, foreheads, stomachs, and chests, judging illness by temperature, texture, or tenderness. Although they lacked thermometers, they became remarkably skilled at recognizing fever simply through touch. They listened to breathing, observed walking patterns, examined skin color, and watched facial expressions. These careful observations sometimes allowed surprisingly accurate diagnoses despite the absence of scientific equipment. Much of modern physical examination still begins with similar observations, though today's physicians understand the biological reasons behind what they see. Scars were often viewed as signs of hidden internal imbalance. Instead of treating only the original wound, healers prescribed special diets, cleansing rituals, or herbal baths intended to restore harmony throughout the entire body. Massage became increasingly common because people noticed it relieved stiffness and improved movement after injuries. Oils infused with herbs reduced friction, while practitioners manipulated muscles and joints using techniques passed down through generations. Although explanations involved balancing invisible energies, massage genuinely eased pain and improved circulation for many patients. Some cultures believed every illness had a personality. A fever might be stubborn, a cough mischievous, or stomach pain angry. Healers spoke directly to these diseases during ceremonies, politely asking them to leave or threatening them with powerful spirits. Children especially found comfort in imagining sickness as something separate from themselves that could eventually be chased away. These conversations transformed invisible suffering into a story with a beginning, a battle, and hopefully a happy ending. The elderly were considered living libraries of medicine. Grandmothers and village elders often knew hundreds of herbal preparations without ever writing them down. Knowledge survived through memory alone. A child spent years learning which leaves reduced swelling, which roots eased stomach pain, and which berries were poisonous. Losing a respected healer meant losing decades of accumulated medical experience. In many places, apprentices memorized enormous collections of remedies, because written books were rare, expensive, or unavailable. Nomadic societies developed medical knowledge quite different from farming communities. Constant travel meant carrying lightweight medicines that survived long journeys. Dried herbs, concentrated oils, and powdered plants replaced bulky preparations. Portable shelters allowed temporary treatment areas wherever illness struck. Since nomads encountered different climates and environments throughout the year, they gradually collected medical knowledge from many neighboring cultures, becoming important carriers of healing traditions across continents. Fear itself sometimes became part of the disease. Ancient people recognized that frightened patients often worsened rapidly. To counter this, healers used confident voices, dramatic clothing, ceremonial staffs, and elaborate rituals that inspired trust. Their appearance mattered because confidence reassured families that someone capable was in control. Even when treatments offered little physical benefit, reducing panic sometimes improved a patient's ability to rest, eat, and recover naturally. In this way, the healer's presence became almost as important as the remedy itself. As trade routes expanded across Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, medicinal plants became valuable commodities. Cinnamon, ginger, frankincense, myrrh, aloe, saffron, and countless other natural products traveled thousands of miles. Some were genuinely useful medicines, while others owed their popularity to rarity rather than effectiveness. The more distant a remedy's origin, the more magical it seemed. Wealthy patients often believed imported medicines worked better simply because they came from mysterious foreign lands. Eventually, centuries of observation began separating effective treatments from ineffective ones. Healers noticed that washing wounds before bandaging them usually produced better results. They realized broken bones healed more reliably when kept still. Nutritious food restored strength faster than starvation. Isolation sometimes prevented entire families from becoming sick after one member fell ill, even though nobody understood the role of contagious microorganisms. These observations accumulated slowly, generation after generation, laying the groundwork for future scientific discoveries. The story of medicine before hospitals is not simply a collection of bizarre cures and unbelievable superstitions. It is the story of ordinary people confronting extraordinary challenges with the only tools they possessed. Every herb gathered from a hillside, every prayer whispered beside a bedside, every strange ritual performed beneath the stars, and every unusual remedy mixed in a clay bowl represented humanity's refusal to accept illness without a fight. While modern hospitals now rely on microscopes, vaccines, sterile surgery, and advanced technology, they stand on foundations built by countless forgotten healers who observed nature, shared knowledge, cared for strangers, and searched endlessly for answers. Their methods may seem strange today, but their determination to relieve suffering remains instantly recognizable, connecting us across thousands of years of human history. Another unusual aspect of life before hospitals was the belief that illness could become trapped inside clothing. If someone recovered from a serious fever, their garments were sometimes burned, buried, or abandoned far from the village. This was not because people understood germs, but because they believed sickness clung to fabric like an invisible curse. In some regions, recovering patients were given completely new clothes to symbolize leaving disease behind. Although based on superstition, destroying contaminated clothing occasionally reduced the spread of certain infections, making the practice appear even more successful. Bridges, crossroads, and riverbanks were often considered powerful healing locations. Ancient people believed these places existed between two worlds, making them ideal for leaving illness behind. A patient might walk across a bridge while carrying a small object believed to contain their sickness, then throw it into the flowing water without looking back. Others buried symbolic objects at crossroads, because travelers passing over them were thought to carry the disease away. These rituals gave people a sense of closure after surviving dangerous illnesses. Some healers specialized in nothing but broken bones. Long before X-rays, they relied entirely on touch and experience. By carefully feeling swollen limbs, comparing both sides of the body, and listening to the patient's description of the injury, they often determined where bones had fractured. Wooden splints, leather straps, woven reeds, and tightly wrapped cloth held broken arms and legs in place. Surprisingly, many of these techniques resembled modern splinting methods. Success depended not on advanced technology but on patience, careful observation, and keeping the injured limb as still as possible for weeks. Nosebleeds inspired particularly strange remedies because sudden bleeding frightened almost everyone. Some believed looking upward stopped the blood because it encouraged it to return inside the body. Others tied strings around fingers or placed cold metal objects against the neck. Certain cultures whispered special words into the patient's ear while pressing herbs beneath the nose. Since many nosebleeds naturally stop within minutes, almost every remedy appeared successful, strengthening confidence in local traditions. People also feared unexplained swelling. A swollen neck, leg, or face could signal serious illness, but ancient healers interpreted these symptoms in many different ways. Warm stones wrapped in cloth were placed over swollen areas to draw out harmful substances. Others preferred cold river water, believing it calmed angry tissues. Herbal poultices remained attached for hours or even days. Families carefully watched whether the swelling grew larger or smaller, using these changes to judge whether the treatment was working. One fascinating belief involved echoes. In isolated mountain communities, certain healers shouted the patient's name toward cliffs or caves, believing the returning echo carried healing power. If the echo sounded clear, recovery was considered likely. If it seemed weak or distorted, families prepared for the worst. These traditions reflected humanity's tendency to find meaning in natural phenomena during times of uncertainty. Ancient sailors developed their own medical knowledge through necessity. Months at sea forced crews to improvise treatments using whatever supplies remained aboard. Salt water washed wounds, fish oil softened cracked skin, and fermented foods were used whenever fresh plants disappeared. Sailors learned through painful experience that long voyages without fresh fruits caused weakness, bleeding gums, and eventually death from scurvy. Although they did not understand vitamin C, some captains noticed citrus fruits prevented these mysterious symptoms centuries before science explained why. Many cultures believed that illness disliked loud celebrations. Villages occasionally organized dances, singing, and festivals specifically intended to frighten disease away. Masks representing protective spirits filled the streets, while drums echoed through the night. These gatherings also served another purpose, reminding frightened communities that life continued despite outbreaks of sickness. Shared hope became almost as important as shared medicine. Ancient healers often paid close attention to a patient's appetite. Someone refusing food worried them greatly because they recognized that prolonged weakness usually ended badly. To encourage eating, they prepared flavorful broths, sweet fruits, soft breads, and gentle herbal drinks. Even without understanding calories or nutrition, generations of experience taught them that people who regained their appetite frequently survived. This simple observation remains valuable in medicine today, ringing in the ears puzzled physicians for centuries. Some believed tiny insects buzzed inside the head. Others thought invisible spirits whispered messages that only the sick could hear. Treatments ranged from warm oils poured into the ears to herbal smoke directed through hollow tubes. Certain healers gently massaged the jaw and neck, occasionally relieving muscle tension that contributed to discomfort. Again, practical observation sometimes produced benefits even when explanations remained completely incorrect. Scar tissue fascinated ancient medicine because it represented visible proof that the body could repair itself. Healers experimented with oils, animal fats, beeswax, and plant extracts to soften scars and improve movement after injuries. Massage became increasingly common for recovering soldiers whose wounds had healed but remained stiff. Although they lacked scientific understanding of connective tissue, many practitioners discovered that gentle movement prevented joints from becoming permanently rigid. The weather was blamed for countless illnesses. Cold winds supposedly entered the body through exposed skin. Thick fog carried invisible poisons. Thunderstorms disturbed the balance of internal organs. People dressed according to these beliefs, wrapping scarves around their necks, avoiding sleeping beneath open windows, and staying indoors during certain weather conditions. While these explanations misunderstood disease, sheltering from harsh weather often reduced exposure and conserved body heat, indirectly benefiting health. Ancient hunters believed animals could teach medicine. They observed wounded deer licking specific plants, bears rubbing against certain trees, and birds collecting aromatic leaves for their nests. Curious healers occasionally experimented with these same plants, wondering whether animals possess natural knowledge unavailable to humans. Some useful medicinal herbs may have entered traditional medicine through exactly this type of careful observation. Communities also created healing songs that were never written down, passed orally through generations. These songs accompanied childbirth, injuries, fevers, and funerals. Their rhythm helped calm frightened patients while giving families something meaningful to do during long nights of uncertainty. Modern researchers studying traditional cultures have found that many of these healing songs survived for centuries, becoming part of a community's identity even after their original medical purpose faded. Perhaps the most remarkable feature of medicine before hospitals was its incredible diversity. Two neighboring villages, separated by only a few miles, could treat the same illness in completely different ways. One relied heavily on herbs, another on prayer, another on massage, and another on animal-based remedies. Every community believed its traditions had been proven through generations of experience. Without written scientific studies to compare results, local customs became the strongest evidence people possessed. History remembers the kings, generals, and great empires of the ancient world. But millions of ordinary healers quietly shaped humanity's survival. They wandered forests, collecting medicinal plants before sunrise, stayed awake through freezing nights beside feverish children, learned by watching older generations, and risked their own health caring for the sick during deadly epidemics. Most of their names have been forgotten, yet their observations slowly accumulated across thousands of years. Some of their cures disappeared because they failed, others evolved into modern medical practices, and a surprising number inspired scientific discoveries centuries later. Before hospitals transformed healthcare into the organized system we know today, survival depended on these dedicated individuals who combined courage, tradition, observation, and hope in humanity's endless struggle against disease. Not every ancient treatment focused on curing disease. Many were designed simply to help people endure suffering until the illness either passed or claimed their life. Families spent countless hours cooling feverish relatives with damp cloths, fanning them during hot weather, and gently offering water one sip at a time. Although these acts seem ordinary today, they often made the difference between survival and death. Dehydration was a silent killer, and even without understanding its biology, experienced caregivers recognized that patients who continued drinking had a better chance of recovery. Some civilizations believed every disease had a favorite time of day, a fever rising at sunset, a cough worsening before dawn, or pain increasing at noon. All carried symbolic meaning. Healers carefully recorded these patterns in memory, believing they revealed the true nature of the illness. Patients were sometimes awakened in the middle of the night to drink herbal mixtures, because that hour was considered especially powerful. Others were forbidden from sleeping during certain periods, convinced that evil spirits became active while people rested. Ancient healers also paid close attention to the tongue. Long before laboratory tests, they believed its color, moisture, texture, and coating revealed what was happening deep inside the body. A pale tongue suggested weakness, a dry tongue indicated dangerous fever, and a thick coating was thought to represent harmful substances building up within. While their explanations differed from modern medicine, observing the tongue remains part of physical examinations in many medical traditions today, because it can genuinely provide clues about hydration and overall health. Sweat itself was considered valuable evidence. Physicians noted whether patients perspired heavily, remained unusually dry, or produced sweat with a particularly strong odor. Some believed foul-smelling sweat meant the body was successfully expelling disease, encouraging them to wrap patients in blankets to increase perspiration even further. Steam from boiling herbs filled enclosed rooms where patients sat for hours, believing every drop of sweat carried illness out through the skin. The elderly often warned against sleeping directly on the ground during sickness. Cold earth was believed to drain life energy from the body, while raised wooden beds preserved warmth and strength. In many regions, recovering patients slept close to the family fire because steady warmth symbolized returning health. Although the reasons were misunderstood, avoiding cold, damp ground reduced exposure to harsh conditions that could worsen existing illnesses. Ancient marketplaces frequently attracted traveling healers promising miraculous cures. These wandering practitioners carried colorful bottles, mysterious powders, dried plants, and dramatic stories about impossible recoveries. Crowds gathered to watch impressive demonstrations as sellers confidently claimed their remedies cured everything from baldness to blindness. Some honestly believed in their medicines, while others knowingly exaggerated their effectiveness. Distinguishing genuine healers from clever entertainers proved almost impossible for ordinary people desperate to save loved ones. Many communities believed laughter could literally confuse disease. If a patient remained cheerful despite severe illness, sickness supposedly became weaker because it expected fear and sadness instead. Friends visited with amusing stories. Musicians played lively tunes, and children were encouraged to laugh near recovering relatives. Although they had no knowledge of psychology, these traditions recognized that emotional support influenced a person's ability to endure prolonged suffering. Silence also became a medicine. Certain healers insisted that seriously ill patients recover in complete quiet. Loud conversations, arguments, and unnecessary visitors were discouraged because they were believed to disturb the body's natural healing process. Families spoke softly, walked gently, and dimmed lights after sunset. Modern hospitals continue to value quiet environments for many patients, though today's reasons involve reducing stress and promoting restful sleep rather than mystical balance. Ancient people often looked to animals for signs of approaching illness. If dogs refused to enter a house, birds abandoned nearby trees, or livestock behaved strangely, families sometimes interpreted these events as warnings that disease was coming. During epidemics, such observations gained even greater importance as frightened communities searched desperately for patterns that might explain the suffering surrounding them. One particularly unusual belief held that mirrors weakened sick people. In some traditions, reflective surfaces were covered, while someone recovered because mirrors were thought to trap part of the patient's spirit or confuse healing energies. Others feared that seeing one's pale, exhausted reflection would discourage recovery. Whether from superstition or compassion, removing mirrors allowed patients to focus less on their deteriorating appearance and more on resting. Smell remained one of the most trusted diagnostic tools. Experienced healers could often distinguish infected wounds, digestive illnesses, lung diseases, or severe fevers simply by their characteristic odors. Without laboratory equipment, their senses became remarkably refined. While their explanations centered on imbalances or spiritual corruption, careful observation occasionally led to surprisingly accurate assessments of a patient's condition. Communities struck by repeated outbreaks sometimes developed early forms of isolation. Families avoided entering homes where illness had appeared. Meals were left outside doors, and travelers from affected villages were treated cautiously. These practices were usually motivated by fear of curses or poisoned air rather than germs, yet limiting contact inadvertently reduced transmission of contagious diseases. It was one of humanity's earliest steps toward understanding the importance of separating the sick from the healthy. As generations passed, countless remedies disappeared because they consistently failed, while others survived because people repeatedly observed positive results. Herbal teas that soothed sore throats, honey that protected wounds, willow bark that eased pain, and clean water that prevented dehydration gradually earned lasting reputations. Even without scientific experiments, humanity slowly filtered useful knowledge from ineffective traditions through centuries of observation and experience. The arrival of organized hospitals marked one of history's greatest turning points, but it did not erase the wisdom or determination of earlier generations. Behind every modern operating room, emergency department, and intensive care unit lies a history stretching back thousands of years. To villages where medicine depended on memory instead of textbooks, courage instead of technology, and hope instead of certainty. Before doctors wore white coats and surgeons operated beneath electric lights, ordinary people fought disease with herbs gathered at sunrise, prayers whispered beside flickering fires, songs passed down through countless generations, and an unwavering belief that tomorrow might bring healing. Their methods often seem strange today, yet they represent the first chapters of humanity's extraordinary journey toward understanding the human body, a journey built not only on scientific discovery, but also on compassion, persistence, and the timeless refusal to give up in the face of illness. Even after a patient recovered, ancient communities often believed the danger was not completely over. Many feared that illness lingered around the home, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Families swept the floors with fresh branches, washed walls with herbal water, replaced sleeping mats, and aired blankets beneath the sun for several days. Smoke from fragrant plants drifted through every room in what was believed to be a final cleansing ritual. Although people thought they were removing evil spirits or harmful energies, exposing bedding to sunlight and improving ventilation occasionally reduced bacteria, mold, and insects, providing unexpected health benefits. Ancient healers also paid remarkable attention to the pulse. Without stethoscopes or blood pressure monitors, they rested their fingers lightly against a patient's wrist and counted the rhythm with extraordinary concentration. Some believed a fast pulse meant excessive heat inside the body, while a slow pulse indicated weakness or failing life energy. Others claimed every illness produced its own unique pattern. Experienced practitioners spent decades mastering pulse reading, believing it revealed secrets hidden from ordinary observation. While their interpretations varied widely, feeling the pulse remains one of the oldest medical techniques still practiced today. Travel itself was sometimes prescribed as medicine. If someone suffered from long-lasting illness, families believed a change of environment might restore health. Patients were encouraged to spend time near forests, rivers, mountains, or the sea. Fresh air, peaceful surroundings, and cleaner water often improved general well-being. Even though people attributed recovery to sacred landscapes or powerful natural spirits, rather than healthier living conditions, wealthy individuals traveled hundreds of miles seeking famous healing springs or temples, while poorer families simply moved sick relatives into quieter parts of the countryside whenever possible. Certain trees earned legendary reputations as healers. Oak trees symbolized strength, olive trees represented peace, and willow trees became associated with relief from pain. Patients tied ribbons pieces of cloth or handwritten prayers to branches, hoping the tree would absorb their suffering. Some embraced enormous trunks for long periods, believing the life force of ancient trees could strengthen weakened bodies. These customs survived in many regions for centuries, blending medicine with deep respect for the natural world. Ancient communities were also fascinated by gemstones. Amber was believed to calm fever. Turquoise protected against poisoning. Coral shielded children from disease, and crystal purified the body. Wealthy families placed polished stones beneath pillows, wore them around the neck, or soaked them in water before drinking it. Since precious stones were rare and expensive, owning them inspired confidence, making many patients genuinely believe they felt stronger, simply because they possessed such treasured objects. The changing seasons shaped nearly every aspect of healthcare. Spring was considered the ideal time to cleanse the body after winter, while autumn focused on preparing for the harsh months ahead. Special diets, herbal drinks, and fasting rituals marked these seasonal transitions. Healers believed the body had to remain in harmony with nature's cycles. Although their theories differed from modern science, adjusting food and activity according to seasonal availability often resulted in healthier diets and lifestyles. Some villages relied on designated healing houses rather than formal hospitals. These were ordinary homes belonging to respected healers, where patients stayed for days or weeks under close supervision. Family members prepared meals, collected herbs, changed bandages, and comforted the sick. There were no separate wards, operating rooms, or trained nurses as we know them today. Healing took place in the middle of daily life, surrounded by cooking fires, children playing outside, and neighbors bringing supplies. Recovery depended as much on community support as on any medicine being administered. The sense of smell remained one of humanity's earliest diagnostic tools. Long before laboratories identified infections, experienced healers noticed that certain illnesses produced distinctive odors: sweet, smelling breath, foul wounds, sour sweat, or unusual body odors. All became clues pointing toward different conditions. They could not explain why these smells occurred, but careful observation allowed them to recognize patterns that repeated across generations of patients. Many ancient people believed illness became stronger when spoken about too often. Families avoided repeatedly naming severe diseases, fearing this gave them additional power. Instead, they referred to sickness indirectly through nicknames or symbolic descriptions. This practice reflected the belief that words themselves possessed tremendous influence over reality. In some cultures, healers whispered a patient's true name only during important ceremonies, because they believed names carried spiritual power connected to health. Children recovering from serious illness often received small handmade toys carved from wood, clay, or bone. These were not simply gifts to pass the time. Families believed happiness strengthened the body and distracted children from pain. Bright colors, familiar songs, and comforting stories surrounded young patients whenever possible. Although ancient medicine lacked modern pediatric knowledge, caregivers instinctively understood that emotional comfort played an important role in recovery. The night sky frequently guided medical decisions. Some healers refused to gather medicinal plants after sunrise, insisting that herbs collected before dawn possessed greater healing strength. Others waited until moonlight illuminated certain flowers before harvesting them. Entire calendars were organized around the belief that nature offered its greatest medicinal power only during specific moments. Whether scientifically accurate or not, these traditions encouraged careful observation of seasonal plant cycles and preserved valuable botanical knowledge across generations. One remarkable feature of pre-hospital medicine was the willingness to learn from failure. When a remedy repeatedly proved useless, many experienced healers quietly abandoned it and searched for alternatives. They experimented with different combinations of herbs, changed preparation methods, or adjusted treatment timing based on years of observation, although they lacked formal clinical trials. This gradual process of trial and error slowly improved many traditional practices over centuries. The greatest lesson from this long history is that ancient medicine was never simply a collection of strange superstitions. It represented humanity's first determined attempt to understand illness in a world without microscopes, chemistry, anatomy textbooks, or modern hospitals. Every herbal mixture stirred in a clay pot, every pulse carefully counted beneath weathered fingers, every comforting story told beside a patient's bed, and every sleepless night spent caring for the sick reflected an enduring human instinct: the refusal to surrender when someone needed help. Modern hospitals, advanced surgery, antibiotics, vaccines, and medical technology transformed healthcare beyond anything ancient healers could have imagined. Yet the compassion at the heart of medicine has remained unchanged. Thousands of years separate today's physicians from the village healers of the ancient world, but both share the same timeless goal: to ease suffering, preserve life, and give every patient the greatest possible chance to see another sunrise. Long before medical schools existed, becoming a healer usually meant learning through observation rather than formal education. A young apprentice spent years following an experienced elder, memorizing hundreds of plants, animal products, minerals, and rituals. There were no printed textbooks or examinations. Every lesson came from watching real patients, listening to stories of successful recoveries, and remembering which remedies repeatedly failed. Since most knowledge was passed orally, a respected healer's death sometimes meant an entire lifetime of medical experience disappeared forever. Communities therefore treated skilled healers with enormous respect, because they possessed knowledge that could not easily be replaced. The journey to find medicine was often as difficult as the treatment itself. Valuable herbs rarely grew beside people's homes. Healers climbed steep mountains, crossed rivers, entered dense forests, and explored dangerous swamps, searching for plants believed to bloom only during certain weeks of the year. Some flowers opened only at sunrise, while others were gathered after sunset because tradition claimed darkness increased their healing power. Collecting medicine required patience, physical endurance, and intimate knowledge of the natural landscape. A successful healer was often as much a botanist and explorer as a physician. Many remedies depended on fermentation. Long before scientists understood microorganisms, people discovered that allowing certain fruits, grains, milk, or herbs to ferment changed their properties. Fermented drinks were sometimes given to patients with digestive problems, while fermented plant mixtures became poultices for wounds. Although the reasons remained mysterious, fermentation occasionally produced substances that discouraged harmful bacteria or preserved valuable nutrients. These accidental discoveries became treasured traditions repeated for countless generations. Scars from previous illnesses were treated almost like history books. Experienced healers examined old injuries to understand what a patient had survived in the past. A badly healed broken arm suggested previous trauma, while scars from infections hinted at earlier disease. Without written medical records, the human body itself became a record of past illnesses. Patients carried their medical history quite literally on their skin. Ancient communities also believed emotions directly affected physical health. Someone consumed by grief, anger, or fear was thought to become vulnerable to disease because these powerful feelings disturbed the body's natural balance. Families therefore surrounded recovering relatives with encouragement, songs, storytelling, and companionship. Arguments were discouraged near seriously ill patients because emotional distress was believed to interfere with healing. Although ancient explanations involved spiritual harmony rather than hormones or psychology, modern research confirms that prolonged stress can indeed influence physical health. Another unusual practice involved sleeping positions. Certain illnesses supposedly improved only if patients slept facing east, while others required the head to point toward a particular mountain, river, or sacred site. Beds were sometimes rearranged entirely according to local beliefs. Families took these directions seriously because they believed invisible natural forces flowed through the landscape, affecting anyone who rested in the wrong orientation. Food itself became one of the oldest medicines. Thick soups, rich in vegetables, grains, and herbs nourished weak patients who could no longer chew solid food. Bone broth simmered for hours over slow fires, creating warm, easily digested meals that restored strength after prolonged illness. Families noticed that people who managed to eat regularly often recovered faster than those who refused food, even if they could not explain the biological reasons behind proper nutrition. The weather influenced nearly every treatment. Rainwater collected during specific storms was believed to possess special healing qualities. Morning dew gathered from leaves appeared in eye treatments and skin remedies. Snow cooled high fevers, while warmed river stones soothed aching muscles. Nature supplied both the medicine and the tools used to apply it. Every season introduced different resources, encouraging healers to adapt constantly throughout the year. Ancient epidemics tested entire societies. When mysterious illnesses spread rapidly through villages, people desperately searched for explanations. Some blamed unusual animals, others accused strangers, while many believed the gods demanded repentance. Communities organized public ceremonies, offered sacrifices, rang bells, lit enormous fires, and prayed together for relief. Although these actions could not eliminate infectious disease, they united frightened populations during moments of overwhelming uncertainty and reminded people they faced danger together rather than alone. Many healers believed the body possessed an extraordinary ability to heal itself if simply given enough support. Rather than aggressively treating every illness, they focused on providing warmth, clean water, nourishing food, rest, and gentle herbal remedies while waiting for nature to restore balance. This philosophy acknowledged something surprisingly accurate. The immune system successfully defeats many illnesses without dramatic intervention. Ancient healers misunderstood why recovery occurred, but they often recognized when patients proved wiser than constant experimentation. As civilizations grew larger, written medical knowledge gradually replaced oral tradition. Clay tablets, papyrus scrolls, bamboo strips, parchment manuscripts, and handwritten books preserved remedies that once existed only in memory. Physicians could now compare observations made by healers living hundreds of miles away or even centuries earlier. This slow accumulation of shared knowledge became one of the most important turning points in medical history, allowing each generation to build upon discoveries made by those before them, rather than beginning again from nothing. The development of hospitals eventually transformed medicine into an organized profession. But the transition took centuries. Traditional healers, herbalists, midwives, religious leaders, and early physicians continued working side by side, each offering different explanations for illness and different paths toward recovery. Patients frequently combined all of them, hoping that somewhere among the herbs, prayers, rituals, diets, and practical treatments lay the answer that would save their lives. Looking back across thousands of years, the strangest medical practices reveal more than unusual remedies. They reveal humanity's remarkable resilience. Faced with diseases they could not identify, invisible infections they could not see, and injuries they could barely understand, ancient people refused to surrender. They observed nature, experimented with plants, cared for neighbors, comforted strangers, and passed every lesson to the next generation in the hope that tomorrow's healers might know a little more than today's. Their world lacked hospitals, antibiotics, X-rays, and modern surgery, yet it overflowed with determination, compassion, and an unwavering belief that every life was worth fighting for. That relentless search for better ways to heal eventually led to the scientific breakthroughs that transformed medicine forever, making the strange and fascinating treatments of the ancient world the first steps in humanity's long journey toward modern healthcare. One of the most overlooked aspects of ancient medicine was how deeply it depended on observation of everyday life. Healers noticed which villages experienced fewer illnesses, which families seemed unusually healthy, and which occupations suffered from particular diseases. Blacksmiths often developed breathing problems from smoke. Farmers experienced aching backs from endless labor, and fishermen frequently battled infected cuts caused by hooks and sharp shells. Although they could not explain these patterns scientifically, they slowly recognized that different ways of living influenced health. These observations formed some of humanity's earliest attempts to connect lifestyle with disease. In many places, people believed that every medicinal plant had a specific season when its healing power reached its peak. Leaves gathered too early were considered weak, while roots dug up too late supposedly lost their strength. Entire families travelled into forests at dawn during certain months to harvest herbs before the morning sun became too hot. Plants were carefully dried beneath shaded roofs rather than direct sunlight, because healers believed excessive heat destroyed their medicinal qualities. Whether by coincidence or practical experience, these methods often preserved active compounds more effectively than careless storage. Ancient people also developed unusual methods for measuring medicine. Without scales or measuring spoons, doses were described using handfuls, finger widths, shellfuls, or the size of familiar objects like beans, walnuts, or eggs. A healer might instruct someone to drink 1 shell of herbal liquid or apply a paste as thick as a thumb. Because measurements varied from person to person, treatments often differed slightly each time they were prepared. This inconsistency sometimes made powerful remedies ineffective and gentle remedies unexpectedly dangerous. Many communities believed that silence in nature carried healing power. Patients recovering from long illnesses were encouraged to spend time beside quiet lakes, beneath large trees, or in isolated valleys where only birds and flowing water could be heard. The peaceful surroundings reduced stress and allowed exhausted people to rest away from crowded villages. Although ancient healers described this as restoring harmony between the body and nature, modern researchers recognize that calm environments can lower stress levels and support recovery. Children learned about medicine surprisingly early in life. They accompanied parents while collecting herbs, watched grandparents prepare remedies, and memorized the appearance of poisonous plants that had to be avoided. By adolescence, many already recognized dozens of useful plants growing near their homes. This practical education ensured valuable knowledge survived across generations, even when nothing was written down. Before thermometers existed, fever was judged entirely through experience. Healers touched the forehead, neck, chest, and hands while comparing body temperature to healthy relatives. Some even estimated whether a fever was rising or falling simply by repeating these examinations throughout the day. Families became highly skilled at recognizing dangerous changes because careful observation often provided the only warning before a patient's condition suddenly worsened. Some illnesses inspired remarkable acts of creativity. Patients unable to swallow food received thin broths poured slowly through hollow reeds. Broken jaws were supported with cloth wrapped around the head. Walking sticks, carved crutches, and simple wooden supports helped injured people remain mobile long before modern orthopedic equipment existed. Necessity encouraged endless innovation, using whatever materials happened to be available nearby. Ancient healers frequently relied on smell when identifying medicinal plants. Before scientific classification, herbs were distinguished by fragrance, leaf texture, flower color, and growing location, rather than Latin names. Apprentices spent years learning these subtle differences because confusing one plant with another could prove fatal. A pleasant-smelling herb collected from a hillside might heal stomach pain, while a similar-looking plant growing in damp marshland could be poisonous. Communities often treated recovering patients as though they were beginning a second life. Once someone survived a severe illness, neighbors gathered to celebrate with shared meals, songs, and gifts. These celebrations acknowledged not only the individual's recovery, but also the efforts of everyone who had provided food, medicine, and care throughout the illness. Recovery became a community achievement, rather than a private event. One fascinating practice involved observing insects. Healers noticed flies gathered quickly around infected wounds, but avoided healthier ones. While they misunderstood the reason, this simple observation sometimes helped identify injuries requiring greater attention. Likewise, ants were occasionally watched because people believed they instinctively recognized useful medicinal plants, whether these beliefs were accurate or not. Ancient people constantly searched the natural world for clues that might improve their understanding of disease. Even after centuries of experience, healers remained humble before illnesses they could not explain. They recognized that some patients recovered despite receiving no treatment, while others died despite every remedy available. This uncertainty encouraged endless experimentation with new herbs, diets, bathing methods, and healing rituals. Every unexpected recovery became an opportunity to learn, while every failure inspired new questions. In many ways, this willingness to observe, adapt, and keep searching laid the foundation for the scientific method that would emerge much later. The story of medicine before hospitals is ultimately the story of human perseverance. Every generation inherited a world filled with disease, injury, childbirth complications, epidemics, and accidents. Yet each generation refused to accept suffering as inevitable. They explored forests for healing plants, studied the changing seasons, cared for strangers during deadly outbreaks, passed knowledge from parent to child, and experimented with countless remedies in the hope of discovering something better. Most of their explanations have been replaced by modern science, but their determination remains timeless. Today's hospitals, advanced surgical techniques, life-saving medicines, and sophisticated medical technology represent the continuation of a journey that began thousands of years ago around village fires, inside humble homes, and in the hands of ordinary people who never stopped searching for ways to heal the sick. Disease did not only affect the body in the ancient world, it often changed a person's place in society. Someone who survived a mysterious illness might be viewed as blessed by the gods, while another person with the same disease could be feared as cursed. Entire villages sometimes treated recovering patients with caution, waiting days or even weeks before welcoming them back into everyday life. Families developed rituals to mark the end of sickness, such as sharing a special meal, washing in a nearby river, or lighting small lamps throughout the home. These customs symbolized leaving suffering behind and beginning life again with renewed strength. Many ancient healers believed the human voice itself possessed healing qualities. They spoke to patients in slow, rhythmic patterns, repeating comforting phrases over and over again. Some chants lasted several minutes, while others continued throughout the night beside someone with a dangerous fever. The exact words often varied between cultures, but the goal remained the same: calm the mind, reduce fear, and encourage the body to recover. Although modern medicine does not attribute supernatural power to spoken words, compassionate communication continues to play an important role in patient care. The hands of experienced healers were considered their greatest tools. Long before advanced instruments existed, they learned to identify swollen glands, broken bones, stiff joints, enlarged organs, and painful muscles simply through careful touch. Years of practice made their fingers remarkably sensitive. A skilled healer could sometimes recognize subtle changes that inexperienced people overlooked entirely. Their hands became living diagnostic instruments, refined through decades of observation. Ancient people also believed that every home possessed its own health. A damp house, a smoky cooking area, or a poorly ventilated room was often blamed for repeated illness. Families regularly opened doors and windows, swept away dust, repaired leaking roofs, and moved sleeping areas according to local traditions. While they associated these actions with removing bad spirits or unhealthy air, improving cleanliness and ventilation often reduced the spread of respiratory illnesses and created healthier living conditions. In some regions, patients recovering from serious injuries were encouraged to take slow daily walks rather than remain in bed indefinitely. Healers noticed that people who gradually resumed gentle movement often regained strength faster than those who stayed completely inactive for months. Although they lacked knowledge of muscles, circulation, or rehabilitation, they recognized that careful movement could restore mobility after illness or injury. These early observations resemble the principles behind modern physical therapy. Ancient medicine also placed enormous importance on memory. Every unusual symptom, successful remedy, or unexpected recovery became a story repeated throughout families and villages. These stories served as medical records in societies where few people could read or write. Children grew up hearing detailed accounts of past epidemics, dangerous plants, difficult childbirths, and miraculous recoveries. In this way, history itself became a form of medicine, helping future generations prepare for challenges they had not yet experienced. Traveling merchants often introduced unfamiliar illnesses into distant communities. Villagers noticed that strangers occasionally arrived healthy but left behind widespread sickness. Without understanding infectious disease, people debated whether the newcomers carried curses, offended local spirits, or brought poisoned goods. Some communities responded by creating early forms of health inspection, observing travelers before allowing them to enter crowded settlements. Although motivated by superstition rather than science, these precautions sometimes reduced the spread of contagious diseases. The preparation of medicine could be almost ceremonial. Herbs were crushed using smooth stones passed down through generations. Liquids simmered slowly in clay pots over carefully controlled fires. Powders were stored in carved wooden containers protected from moisture. Every step followed traditions believed to maximize healing power. The process required patience because rushing the preparation was thought to weaken the remedy. Even when the medical explanation proved incorrect, careful preparation often produced cleaner, more consistent treatments. Some healers became famous far beyond their own villages. People traveled for weeks across mountains, deserts, and rivers seeking their help. A healer's reputation spread entirely by word of mouth through merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and travelers. Without advertisements or written reviews, success depended on stories shared by grateful patients. Those with exceptional skill sometimes advised kings and rulers, while others quietly spent their entire lives serving small farming communities without ever leaving their homeland. As civilizations expanded, medicine gradually became more specialized. Certain healers focused on childbirth, others on broken bones, eye diseases, poisonous bites, or herbal medicine. This specialization allowed knowledge to deepen within particular areas, even though the scientific understanding of disease remained limited. Communities increasingly recognized that no single person could master every aspect of healing, an idea that continues in modern medicine through specialized doctors and surgeons. Ancient medicine also taught people the value of prevention. Even if the reasons were misunderstood, communities encouraged regular bathing where water was available, proper food storage, moderate eating, physical activity, and avoiding spoiled food. Parents taught children not to drink from stagnant pools and to keep living areas as clean as possible. These habits developed through observation rather than microbiology. Yet many genuinely reduced illness and improved survival. Perhaps the most extraordinary achievement of medicine before hospitals was not any single cure or remarkable treatment. It was humanity's refusal to stop learning. Every epidemic, every difficult childbirth, every broken bone, and every mysterious fever became another lesson added to thousands already remembered. Across countless generations, ordinary people observed nature with extraordinary patience, shared discoveries with neighbors, corrected old mistakes, and preserved valuable knowledge despite wars, disasters, and the passage of time. Their world lacked laboratories, antibiotics, anesthesia, and modern hospitals, but it possessed something equally important, an unbreakable determination to understand the mysteries of illness. That determination slowly transformed superstition into observation, observation into experience, and experience into the foundations of scientific medicine. Every hospital standing today, every successful operation, and every life saving treatment owes a small debt to those forgotten healers who, with little more than careful eyes, steady hands, and endless curiosity, began humanity's long journey toward understanding how to heal the human body. In many ancient societies, the boundary between medicine and daily life barely existed. A person's health was thought to depend on everything they did, from the moment they woke until they went to sleep. The direction they faced while praying, the food they ate, the amount of sunlight they received, and even the order in which meals were prepared could all be considered part of staying healthy. Illness was rarely viewed as an isolated event. Instead, it was believed to be the result of countless small imbalances that had slowly accumulated over time. Because of this, healers often asked detailed questions about a person's habits, relationships, work, and recent travels long before modern doctors began taking medical histories. The preparation of herbal medicine was treated with enormous care. Plants were washed in clean water, dried for days beneath shaded roofs, and stored inside clay jars sealed against moisture. Experienced healers knew that poorly stored herbs lost their strength, even though they could not explain the chemical changes taking place. Some remedies required leaves picked in spring, while others depended on roots collected during autumn, after the plant had stored nutrients underground. These traditions reflected centuries of careful observation, rather than random superstition. Ancient villages also depended heavily on collective memory during epidemics. Older members of the community recalled previous outbreaks, describing which symptoms appeared first, how long illnesses usually lasted, and what seemed to help survivors. These stories guided younger generations facing similar diseases decades later. Without written records, history lived inside the memories of ordinary people. A respected elder who had survived several epidemics became as valuable as any healer because experience itself served as a powerful source of medical knowledge. Many healers believed that every patient deserved individual treatment. Two people suffering from similar symptoms might receive completely different remedies because their age, occupation, physical strength, personality, or family history were considered important. A young hunter recovering from an injury might be encouraged to exercise earlier, while an elderly farmer with the same injury rested much longer. Although their reasoning differed from modern medicine, This recognition that patients respond differently to illness remains an important principle in healthcare today. Ancient communities were also surprisingly aware of the importance of clean drinking water. Springs flowing from hillsides were often preferred over stagnant ponds because generations had noticed fewer illnesses among those using fresh water. Wells were protected carefully, and many villages created rules preventing waste from being dumped nearby. People may have explained these customs through spiritual beliefs, but practical observation taught them that cleaner water generally meant healthier communities. Another remarkable feature of ancient medicine was the willingness to combine treatments. A patient with a severe fever might receive herbal tea, cool cloths, prayer, massage, nourishing broth, rest, and comforting companionship all on the same day. Rather than searching for a single miracle cure, healers attacked illness from every direction they understood. This holistic approach reflected the belief that body, mind, family, and environment all influenced recovery together. Time itself was often considered a medicine. Experienced healers recognized that forcing the body too quickly after illness frequently caused setbacks. Patients recovering from serious disease gradually resumed work over days or weeks. Farmers returned first to light tasks before lifting heavy loads. Soldiers recovering from wounds practiced walking before running. Mothers who survived difficult childbirths were encouraged to rest while relatives temporarily assumed household responsibilities. These traditions acknowledged the body's need for gradual recovery. Even without understanding tissue repair or immune function, many medicinal plants earned their reputations through simple persistence. If a certain herb repeatedly eased stomach pain across many generations, it remained part of traditional medicine, regardless of whether anyone understood why. Some of these plants were eventually proven effective by modern science, while others disappeared after careful testing showed little benefit. The important point is that ancient medicine continuously evolved through observation. Successful remedies spread from village to village, while ineffective ones slowly faded from memory. As trade routes connected distant civilizations, medical knowledge traveled alongside silk, spices, metals, and precious stones. Merchants exchanged far more than goods. They shared stories about unfamiliar diseases, unusual herbs, successful treatments, and famous healers encountered during their journeys. A medicinal plant discovered in one region might eventually become valued thousands of miles away. This steady exchange of ideas gradually enriched medical traditions across continents and encouraged innovation long before universities or scientific journals existed. Even the architecture of homes reflected medical thinking. Windows were placed to capture cooling breezes, cooking fires were positioned to reduce smoke inside living areas, and sleeping spaces were arranged where fresh air circulated most easily. Although ancient builders attributed these choices to comfort, spiritual harmony, or local custom, many designs accidentally promoted healthier living conditions by improving ventilation and reducing exposure to smoke. Perhaps the greatest achievement of medicine before hospitals was its extraordinary resilience. Knowledge survived wars, famines, migrations, floods, and the collapse of entire civilizations because it lived inside ordinary people rather than buildings or institutions. Parents taught children how to recognize useful plants. Grandparents demonstrated how to care for wounds. Midwives trained apprentices. Travelers carried remedies across continents. Piece by piece, generation after generation, humanity assembled an enormous collection of practical experience that eventually became the foundation of modern medical science. When we think about the strange ways people treated illness before hospitals, it is easy to focus on the bizarre rituals, unusual ingredients, and incredible superstitions. Yet beneath every curious practice lay a universal human hope. the hope that someone suffering today might live to see tomorrow. Ancient healers did not possess microscopes, antibiotics, vaccines, anesthesia, or sterile operating rooms. But they possessed compassion, patience, and an unwavering determination to help others with whatever knowledge they had. Their world was filled with uncertainty, yet they continued observing, experimenting, learning, and passing their discoveries to the next generation. Those countless small acts of care repeated over thousands of years by millions of forgotten people slowly transformed humanity's understanding of disease and paved the long road toward the hospitals, doctors, and life, saving medical advances that protect billions of lives today. As ancient societies became more organized, some communities began setting aside special places where the sick could recover together. These were not hospitals in the modern sense, but they represented an important step toward organized healthcare. A healer's home, a temple courtyard, or a quiet building near a sacred spring might temporarily house several patients at once. Family members took turns bringing food, changing bedding, gathering firewood, and preparing herbal medicines. Recovery became a shared responsibility rather than something carried by a single household. These early healing centers lacked advanced equipment, yet they demonstrated humanity's growing recognition that caring for the sick required cooperation. Many people believed the first meal after recovering from a serious illness was extremely important. Rich or heavy foods were avoided because the body was considered fragile after prolonged sickness. Instead, patients slowly returned to normal eating through light broths, soft grains, cooked vegetables, and diluted drinks. Healers warned that eating too much too quickly could invite illness back into the body. Although their explanations differed from modern nutritional science, gradually reintroducing food often proved beneficial after long periods of fever or poor appetite. Ancient medicine also relied heavily on patience. Some herbal preparations required soaking overnight, while others simmered over gentle fires for hours before they were considered ready. Oils infused with flowers or leaves might take several weeks to prepare properly. Healers believed rushing the process weakened the medicine, so they carefully followed methods preserved over generations. These lengthy preparations reflected both tradition and the practical reality that extracting useful compounds from plants often required time. Communities living in deserts, mountains, forests, islands, and frozen regions each developed completely different medical traditions because they depended on the natural resources surrounding them. Desert healers relied on drought-resistant plants, tree resins, and mineral salts. Mountain communities used alpine herbs and spring water. Coastal villages incorporated seaweed, shells, fish oils, and salt into their remedies. Dense forests supplied bark, mushrooms, roots, and flowering plants unavailable elsewhere. Geography shaped medicine just as strongly as culture, creating an astonishing variety of healing practices across the ancient world. One remarkable aspect of early medicine was how carefully healers watched the progress of wounds. Every day they examined whether swelling had increased, redness had spread, or new tissue had begun forming. They might not have understood infection, but they recognized warning signs through repeated experience. If a wound developed an unpleasant smell or darkened in color, they knew the patient's condition had become dangerous. Some changed bandages more frequently, washed the injury with clean water, or applied different herbal preparations in response. These careful observations represented the beginnings of systematic wound care. Storytelling itself sometimes became therapy. Elderly relatives entertained recovering patients with tales of heroes overcoming impossible challenges, reminding them that suffering eventually ended. Children confined to bed listened to legends that distracted them from pain and fear. Long evenings passed with songs, myths, and family histories, shared beside small fires. These moments strengthened emotional resilience during illnesses that often lasted weeks or months. Many healers believed sunrise carried special healing power. Patients were encouraged to sit outside in the gentle morning light before the heat of the day became overwhelming. Fresh morning air, sunlight, and quiet surroundings were thought to restore balance to weakened bodies. Although ancient people associated these benefits with spiritual renewal, moderate sunlight helps the body produce vitamin D, and spending time outdoors often improves mood and well-being. Communities also recognized that loneliness could worsen illness. Seriously sick individuals were rarely left alone for long. Friends, neighbors, and relatives visited regularly, bringing food, conversation, and encouragement. Someone remained nearby throughout the night, in case the patient's condition suddenly changed. This constant companionship not only provided practical assistance, but also reduced fear during life's most vulnerable moments. Compassion became one of the oldest forms of medicine. As trade expanded, healers became increasingly curious about unfamiliar remedies from distant lands. A merchant might describe a bark that relieved fever in another kingdom, or a fragrant resin used to treat wounds across the sea. Local healers experimented cautiously with these new materials, combining them with existing traditions. Some imported medicines earned lasting reputations because they genuinely proved useful, while others disappeared after failing to deliver the promised results. This willingness to learn from other cultures gradually broadened humanity's medical knowledge. Even clothing sometimes played a role in treatment. Loose garments were recommended for patients recovering from breathing problems, while warm layers protected those weakened by long fevers. Certain fabrics were believed to promote healing better than others, and blankets warmed near the fire were wrapped around shivering patients to restore comfort. Though simple, these practical measures often eased suffering in an age before central heating or modern medical equipment. Despite all the strange remedies and remarkable traditions, ancient healers understood one truth that remains timeless: recovery required hope. A patient who believed tomorrow could be better often continued eating, drinking, resting, and fighting, even during severe illness. Families surrounded loved ones with reassurance, reminding them of others who had survived similar conditions. Every small improvement, a lower fever, a stronger appetite, a better night's sleep, was celebrated as a sign that life was slowly returning. Hope itself became an invisible medicine, encouraging people to endure until their bodies regained strength. The history of medicine before hospitals is therefore not simply a catalogue of unusual cures or forgotten superstitions. It is a story of millions of ordinary people refusing to surrender in the face of disease. They observed nature with remarkable patience, experimented with countless plants, cared for strangers during epidemics, shared knowledge across generations, and slowly separated useful practices from harmful ones. Their world was filled with uncertainty, but their determination never disappeared. Every careful observation, every successful remedy, and every lesson learned from failure became another step on humanity's long journey towards scientific medicine. Modern hospitals, with their advanced technology, skilled doctors, sterile operating rooms, and life-saving treatments, stand at the end of a path first opened by these forgotten healers, whose greatest achievement was not possessing all the answers, but never giving up the search for them. For many ancient people, surviving a serious illness was seen as a second chance at life. Recovery was often celebrated with small ceremonies that welcomed the patient back into the community. Friends prepared simple feasts. Neighbors brought gifts of fresh bread, fruit, or flowers, and families offered thanks through prayers or acts of charity. These celebrations recognized not only the patient's survival, but also the collective effort of everyone who had spent days or weeks providing food, medicine, comfort, and constant care. In a world without hospitals, healing was rarely an individual experience. It belonged to the entire community. Ancient healers also understood that the body weakened after prolonged illness, even if they could not explain why. Patients were discouraged from immediately returning to heavy labor. Farmers avoided lifting large sacks of grain. Hunters delayed long expeditions into forests, and craftsmen gradually resumed their work one task at a time. Elders warned that recovering too quickly could cause the illness to return even stronger. This cautious approach reflected generations of observation, showing that exhausted bodies required time to rebuild their strength. Throughout history, people searched endlessly for substances believed to restore youth and vitality. Royal courts spent fortunes importing rare herbs from distant mountains, aromatic resins from deserts, pearls from deep oceans, and exotic roots carried across continents by merchants. These ingredients appeared in expensive tonics, promising longer life, sharper minds, stronger bodies, and protection against disease. Most failed to deliver miraculous results, but their popularity demonstrated humanity's timeless desire to escape aging and remain healthy for as long as possible. Many communities also developed remarkable knowledge about poisonous plants. Children learned from an early age which berries should never be eaten, which mushrooms were deadly, and which tree sap caused painful skin reactions. Healers memorized these dangers with extraordinary precision, because confusing one plant for another could prove fatal. This practical botanical knowledge accumulated slowly through centuries of careful observation, ensuring future generations avoided mistakes that had already claimed countless lives. The natural world served as an endless classroom. Healers noticed how certain plants flourished only in wet soil, while others preferred dry hillsides. They observed birds building nests with aromatic leaves, and wondered whether those plants discouraged insects. They watched wounded animals recover after eating unfamiliar herbs, and occasionally experimented with the same species themselves. Nature constantly offered clues, and patient observers transformed many of those clues into traditional remedies passed down through generations. Ancient medicine also depended heavily on trust. A frightened patient placed enormous faith in the healer, standing beside them because there were few alternatives. Confidence itself became part of the treatment. A calm voice, steady hands, and reassuring presence often inspired hope before a single remedy had even been prepared. Experienced healers understood this responsibility and approached patients with quiet confidence, knowing fear could worsen suffering just as surely as disease itself. Communities living near active volcanoes, mineral springs, or unusual geological formations frequently believed these landscapes possessed extraordinary healing powers. Warm mineral pools attracted travelers hoping to ease aching joints and chronic pain. Certain caves became famous because their cool, stable temperatures seemed to comfort people struggling with breathing problems. Mountains were climbed not only for religious reasons, but also because clean air at higher elevations was believed to strengthen weak lungs. Although many explanations involved spiritual forces, changes in climate and environment sometimes genuinely improved certain conditions. As written language spread, healers gradually began recording their observations instead of relying entirely on memory. Lists of medicinal plants, descriptions of symptoms, instructions for preparing remedies, and accounts of unusual recoveries appeared on clay tablets, papyrus scrolls, bamboo strips, and parchment manuscripts. These early medical writings allowed knowledge to survive beyond the lifetime of individual healers. For the first time, discoveries made by one generation could be studied, questioned and improved by the next. Another fascinating feature of ancient medicine was its adaptability. Whenever new plants, foods, or minerals arrived through trade, healers eagerly experimented with them. Some foreign remedies blended into local traditions almost immediately, while others disappeared after proving ineffective. This willingness to test unfamiliar ideas prevented medicine from remaining completely stagnant. Even without formal scientific methods, curiosity continued pushing healthcare forward century after century. Perhaps the greatest challenge facing ancient healers was uncertainty. Two patients could develop similar symptoms, receive identical treatments, yet experience completely different outcomes. One recovered quickly, while the other gradually declined. Without knowledge of viruses, bacteria, genetics, nutrition, or the immune system, these differences seemed mysterious and unpredictable. Rather than giving up, healers carefully remembered every case, hoping repeated observation would eventually reveal hidden patterns. Their persistence transformed medicine from simple guesswork into a growing body of practical experience. When viewed across thousands of years, the evolution of medicine before hospitals becomes one of humanity's greatest stories of perseverance. Every herbal remedy mixed beside a village fire, every wound carefully cleaned with the resources available, every sleepless night spent comforting a feverish child, and every journey into forests searching for healing plants represented another small step toward understanding the human body. Most ancient treatments have long since disappeared, replaced by antibiotics, vaccines, anesthesia, medical imaging, and evidence-based care. Yet the spirit behind those early efforts remains unchanged. Modern doctors, nurses, surgeons, and researchers continue the same mission begun by forgotten healers thousands of years ago: to reduce suffering, preserve life, and learn something new from every patient. The strange remedies of the ancient world may seem distant today, but they remind us that every breakthrough in modern medicine was built upon countless generations of people who refused to stop asking one simple question: how can we help the sick get well? There was also a time when simply surviving an illness could permanently change a person's reputation. Someone who recovered from a disease that had claimed many lives might be seen as unusually fortunate or even protected by divine forces. Neighbors sometimes sought advice from survivors, asking what they had eaten, which healer they had visited, or what prayers had been spoken during their recovery. In this way, personal experience became a valuable source of medical knowledge. Every survivor carried a story that others hoped might one day save their own lives. Ancient healers were often among the busiest people in their communities because illness followed no schedule. A child could develop a fever in the middle of the night. A hunter could return with a deep wound at sunrise, or a difficult childbirth could begin during a violent storm. Healers traveled through darkness, carrying little more than small bags filled with herbs, oils, cloth, and simple tools. They crossed rivers, climbed rocky hills, and walked through forests regardless of weather, because emergencies could not wait until morning. Their work demanded endurance as much as medical knowledge. Many cultures believed the body possessed its own natural rhythm that should never be disturbed unnecessarily. Patients were encouraged to sleep whenever they felt tired, eat only when hungry, and avoid unnecessary stress while recovering. Families protected this quiet routine by limiting visitors and postponing celebrations until the patient regained strength. Although ancient explanations focused on restoring harmony rather than biology, allowing the body adequate rest often supported natural healing processes. Another fascinating tradition involved observing recovery rather than illness alone. Experienced healers carefully noted the first signs that a patient was improving. A stronger voice, brighter eyes, steadier walking, warmer hands, deeper sleep. or the return of laughter were all considered encouraging milestones. These subtle changes often appeared before complete recovery and gave families hope during long periods of uncertainty. Modern healthcare still values many of these same observations because they frequently indicate improving health. The preparation of medicine also became a shared responsibility within families. While the healer decided which plants to use, relatives gathered firewood, fetched clean water, ground herbs into powders, and stirred mixtures over slow fires. Children learned these skills simply by watching adults at work. By the time they reached adulthood, many people understood the basics of preparing common remedies, even if they never became professional healers themselves. People living in remote regions developed extraordinary independence because professional help might be several days away. Shepherds grazing animals in distant mountains, fishermen working isolated coastlines, or travelers crossing deserts had to treat injuries using whatever resources surrounded them. They stitched wounds with thread, created splints from branches, cleaned cuts with fresh water, and relied on portable herbal supplies carried during their journeys. Survival often depended on quick thinking and practical knowledge, rather than access to specialized care. Ancient healers also recognized the importance of observation after treatment. They rarely assumed a remedy had worked immediately. Instead, they returned repeatedly to examine the patient over several days, adjusting herbs, changing bandages, or recommending different foods based on progress. This continuous monitoring reflected an understanding that healing was a process rather than a single event. Each visit added new information that helped shape future decisions. Many medicinal traditions encouraged respect for moderation. Eating too much, working without rest, sleeping excessively, or remaining inactive for long periods were all believed to weaken the body. Balance became one of the central principles of health. Although different civilizations explained moderation in different ways, they generally agreed that extremes of any kind increased the risk of illness. This practical wisdom influenced daily life long before scientific studies linked healthy habits to long-term well-being. As centuries passed, some traditional remedies gradually disappeared, simply because people noticed they consistently failed. Others survived because generation after generation observed genuine improvements. This slow process resembled a primitive form of trial and error carried out across hundreds of years. Without laboratories or controlled experiments, humanity relied on countless individual experiences to determine which practices deserved to be remembered. The arrival of organized hospitals did not erase these ancient traditions overnight. In many places, families continued using familiar herbal remedies alongside professional medical care for generations. Grandparents shared household treatments with children, village healers remained respected members of their communities, and local customs blended with new scientific discoveries. Medicine evolved not by completely abandoning the past, but by gradually testing old beliefs against growing evidence. Looking back today, it is easy to smile at some of history's strangest cures: powdered gemstones, protective charms, mysterious rituals, or elaborate ceremonies performed beneath the stars. Yet these practices reveal something deeply human. They show people refusing to accept helplessness, even when faced with terrifying diseases they could neither see nor understand. Every unusual remedy represented an attempt to bring comfort, create hope, or increase the chances of survival in a world filled with uncertainty. In the end, the greatest medicine before hospitals may not have been found in herbs, minerals, or ancient rituals at all. It existed in the unwavering dedication of ordinary people who refused to abandon the sick. Parents remained awake for nights beside feverish children. Friends carried injured neighbors home from distant fields. Midwives risked their own safety to help mothers through dangerous childbirths. Healers traveled for hours to reach patients living in isolated villages. Communities shared food with families unable to work because of illness. These acts of compassion could not cure every disease, but they gave millions of people the strength to endure until recovery became possible. Modern medicine has transformed the way illnesses are treated, replacing superstition with science and guesswork with evidence. Yet the foundation of healthcare remains exactly the same as it was thousands of years ago: knowledge, compassion, patience, and the determination to care for another human being when they need it most. For all their unusual beliefs, ancient healers shared one remarkable habit with modern physicians. They constantly observed every patient became an opportunity to learn. If a particular herb eased pain in several people, its reputation grew stronger. If another remedy repeatedly failed, experienced healers quietly abandoned it, even when tradition insisted otherwise. Knowledge did not advance through laboratories or universities, but through thousands of small observations made by ordinary people over countless generations. Each successful recovery became another lesson added to humanity's growing understanding of health. Communities also recognized that healing could not always be rushed. Some illnesses lasted only a few days, while others required months before strength fully returned. Families adjusted their routines around recovering relatives, taking over farming, cooking, or childcare, until patients could gradually resume normal life. The entire household adapted because survival often depended on allowing the sick enough time to regain their energy instead of forcing them back to work too soon. Ancient people were deeply aware that weather affected health, even if they misunderstood the reasons. Long periods of cold, heavy rain, intense heat, or drought were frequently followed by waves of illness. Villagers noticed these patterns and prepared accordingly, storing medicinal herbs before winter arrived and collecting fresh plants during warmer months. They believed nature and the human body remained closely connected, with each season presenting its own unique health challenges. Many healers also became skilled listeners. Patients described exactly where pain began, how it changed throughout the day, whether it worsened after eating, or if it spread to other parts of the body. Without X-rays, blood tests, or medical imaging, these conversations formed the foundation of diagnosis. Every detail mattered because the patient's own story often provided the only clues available. Listening carefully became just as important as preparing medicines. In many villages, older women preserved an enormous amount of practical medical knowledge. They knew which foods helped exhausted mothers after childbirth, which herbs soothed infants with stomach pain, how to reduce swelling after injuries, and how to comfort patients through long nights of fever. Much of this knowledge never appeared in written records because it was passed directly from one generation of women to the next. Although history often celebrates famous physicians, countless anonymous caregivers quietly shaped healthcare through everyday experience. People also understood that clean surroundings usually supported recovery. Fresh bedding, swept floors, clean cooking pots, and regularly washed clothing became common recommendations after serious illness. Ancient communities may have explained cleanliness through religious purity or the removal of harmful spirits, but many of these practices unintentionally reduced exposure to infectious organisms and improved overall hygiene. As trade routes expanded, medicinal plants traveled astonishing distances. Cinnamon from tropical forests, frankincense from desert regions, aloe from arid landscapes, ginger from Asia, and countless other natural products crossed mountains and oceans alongside merchants. Every new ingredient inspired curiosity. Healers carefully experimented with unfamiliar plants, comparing them with local remedies and gradually incorporating useful discoveries into traditional practice. The elderly often became respected advisors because they had witnessed diseases that younger generations had never seen. Their memories stretched back decades, allowing them to compare current outbreaks with epidemics from long ago. During times of crisis, Communities turned to these elders for guidance, hoping their experience would reveal patterns others had overlooked. In many ways, they served as living medical archives before written records became widespread. Even after hospitals eventually appeared, many ancient traditions survived because they offered comfort beyond physical treatment. A soothing cup of herbal tea, a family gathering around a recovering patient, quiet rest in fresh air, nourishing homemade soup, gentle massage, and reassuring words remained valuable despite enormous advances in scientific medicine. These practices reminded people that healing involves more than simply curing disease. It also involves restoring strength, reducing fear, and helping patients feel supported throughout recovery. Perhaps the most extraordinary achievement of pre-hospital medicine was not any particular remedy, but the culture of caring it created. Every member of the community had a role. Children gathered firewood, adults prepared food, elders shared knowledge, neighbors checked on isolated families, and healers devoted countless hours to those who could offer little in return. Healthcare existed as a shared responsibility, rather than a professional service alone. Survival depended upon cooperation, compassion, and the willingness of ordinary people to help one another during life's most difficult moments. The strange treatments of the ancient world may seem distant today, but they reveal a timeless truth about humanity. Across every civilization, regardless of language, religion, or geography, people refused to accept suffering without trying to ease it. They searched forests for healing plants, climbed mountains in search of rare herbs, studied animals, observed the changing seasons, recorded unusual recoveries, and passed every lesson to the next generation. Most of their explanations have faded into history, replaced by modern biology, chemistry, and medical science. Yet their determination to understand illness never disappeared. It evolved slowly over thousands of years, eventually leading to the hospitals, research laboratories, and life-saving treatments that exist today. Every vaccine, every surgical breakthrough, every antibiotic, and every modern medical discovery stands as the latest chapter in a story that began long before hospitals, when ordinary people armed with little more than hope, observation, and compassion first began the endless search for ways to heal the human body. As knowledge slowly spread from one civilization to another, healers became increasingly curious about ideas beyond their own traditions. A merchant returning from a distant kingdom might describe a plant that relieved stomach pain, a bathhouse famous for healing sore muscles, or a physician who treated wounds in an unusual way. These stories often inspired local healers to experiment with unfamiliar techniques. Some ideas disappeared quickly because they failed, while others blended into existing practices and survived for centuries. Long before scientific journals existed, conversation itself became one of history's most important ways of sharing medical knowledge. The rhythm of village life also changed whenever someone became seriously ill. Farming schedules were adjusted, meals were shared among neighbors, and children helped with chores usually performed by recovering adults. Entire communities quietly reorganized themselves to support families facing illness. This collective effort reflected an understanding that disease affected everyone, not just the individual lying in bed. The stronger the community worked together, the greater the chance that both the patient and the family would survive difficult times. Many ancient healers believed every part of the body deserved careful attention because one problem could influence another. A painful foot might eventually lead to back pain, while difficulty chewing could weaken the entire body through poor nutrition. Although their explanations relied on balance rather than anatomy, they recognized that the human body functioned as a connected system rather than a collection of separate parts. This broad perspective encouraged treatments that considered the whole. Simple tools became surprisingly sophisticated through centuries of refinement. Mortars and pestles carved from stone produced finer herbal powders. Clay pots distributed heat more evenly, while preparing medicinal mixtures. Sharp bronze or iron blades allowed cleaner surgical cuts than rough stone tools used by earlier generations. Linen bandages became softer and more effective as weaving techniques improved. Each technological improvement, no matter how small, gradually increased the chances of successful treatment. Ancient healers also paid close attention to recovery after injuries. They observed that broken bones became stronger when protected from unnecessary movement, and that wounds healed better when kept reasonably clean. Splints grew more carefully designed, bandages became more secure, and supportive walking sticks allowed injured people to regain independence while healing. These practical improvements emerged through repeated observation rather than scientific theory, demonstrating how experience alone could gradually improve medical care. Some communities believed laughter marked the beginning of true recovery. A patient who smiled, joined conversations, or laughed at a familiar story was considered to have regained an important part of their strength. Families celebrated these small moments because they signaled that fear and exhaustion were slowly giving way to hope. Even today, healthcare workers often recognize improved mood and renewed interest in conversation as encouraging signs during recovery. Throughout history, ordinary people continued adding their own discoveries to traditional medicine. A shepherd noticed a particular leaf soothed insect bites. A fisherman discovered saltwater cleaned cuts more effectively than muddy river water. A mother found that warm broth encouraged a sick child to eat again after days without appetite. These humble observations rarely appeared in history books, yet they quietly influenced healthcare across generations. The development of medicine depended not only on famous physicians but also on countless unnamed individuals who learned through daily life. Communities also learned valuable lessons from failure. When a treatment repeatedly harmed patients or showed no benefit, experienced healers gradually replaced it with something more promising. This process took decades, or even centuries, because change happened slowly, but it demonstrated an important willingness to adapt. Ancient medicine was never completely fixed. It constantly evolved as each generation questioned, modified, and refined the knowledge inherited from those before them. The rise of writing dramatically accelerated this progress. Instead of relying entirely on memory, healers could now compare remedies recorded decades earlier, preserve unusual case histories, and share discoveries across great distances. Medical knowledge became less vulnerable to being lost whenever a respected healer passed away. Written records transformed individual experience into collective learning, allowing civilizations to build upon previous achievements rather than beginning again from scratch. As centuries turned into millennia, the strange world of pre-hospital medicine slowly gave way to more organized systems of healthcare. Temples evolved into healing centers. Traveling healers inspired permanent physicians. Family remedies encouraged systematic observation, and practical experience gradually merged with scientific investigation. Every generation contributed another piece to the puzzle of understanding disease. Some beliefs disappeared forever, while others unexpectedly proved correct when tested by modern science. Looking back across this long journey, it becomes clear that the greatest achievement of ancient medicine was not discovering a miracle cure or inventing a perfect treatment. Its greatest achievement was creating a tradition of relentless curiosity. Faced with mysterious illnesses, terrifying epidemics, painful injuries, and countless unanswered questions, people refused to stop observing, experimenting, caring, and learning. They searched mountains, forests, rivers, deserts, and coastlines for anything that might relieve suffering. They listened to patients, compared experiences, remembered successes, and shared knowledge with future generations. Without realizing it, these forgotten healers laid the first stones on the path that would eventually lead to modern hospitals, life-saving surgeries, powerful medicines, and a scientific understanding of the human body. Their remedies may appear strange today, but their determination to heal the sick remains one of the most inspiring chapters in the history of humanity.